I can see GLP-1 creating new economies and new submarkets that complement this, but it is going to be this divide between eating right, conscious of nutrition in the old world of take a pill, take a shot, and get a quick fix.
Well, we know the payers are figuring it out. Like, when are they going to cover? When can they get away with not covering? You have to think that they're also going to be all in on encouraging these other things. And to your point, Paul, discovering that this kind of diet will solve my problem isn't going to work for a lot of people, but it's an unlock for some, right? And it's an improvement toward better, even if not perfection for some. And weight loss could be redefined in its own whole way next year, to your point, that is inclusive of GLP-1, inclusive of nutrition, inclusive of other community support or ways to drive behavioral change. And it'll be fun to see.
New choices, new players, new models of care. You know, consumer first healthcare is everywhere. For us to build the future, to see what's new, we gotta look at the world from a different point of view. Consumer innovation ain't going away. I say it's here to stay. Today it leads the way. We gotta drop the silos. We're all the same team. Experience, business, tech, and marketing. So join us now. Join the revolution. Consumer first health is the evolution. Status quo or like status no. Yeah, this is the healthcare rap. Yo, come on, let's go. Welcome back to the leading podcast about consumer-centered healthcare. This is episode 377. I'm Jared Johnson, and here's what's going to go down today. We have the flavor of the week, where I'm starting a series of recommendations of industry leaders to follow, watch, read, and listen to on the topic of consumer-centered care. Why am I starting with the microdosing podcast? I'll talk about that. Then it's the first in our annual prediction series, one of our most popular traditions where we invite pairs of guests to make predictions about the whole healthcare landscape. This year, we start with Paul Schrimpf and Jeff Gourdji, who know a thing or two about the realities of the industry. So let's go right to the awesomeness. Are you ready? Let's go. Flavor of the week. I'm going to close the year making a few recommendations of people to follow, watch, read, and listen to, whose perspectives I value and whose insights rise above the noise and clutter. If you want to expand your perspective on consumer-centered care, I invite you to check out these recommendations. My first one is the Microdosing Podcast with host Paul Schrimpf, whom you'll hear in a moment as part of our prediction series. In true microdosing style, Paul releases mini seasons, anywhere from 5 to 15 episodes at a time, depending on the theme. And while he's had some great guests over more than 100 episodes, I'm particularly fond of his op-ed episodes where he's even more candid. Take his current Micro D Goes Macro op-ed series that starts with a couple of episodes that challenge the conventional thinking of where healthcare consumerism has gone. The first in the series is his take on insurance that's not really insurance, which describes several points that are important to understand about the economic model that makes managing a business in healthcare so unique. He explains how health insurance is more like cost control or a co-op, where the insurer brings people together to control costs and smooth out the benefits. Essentially, we have insurance because we believe it's too expensive to pay out of pocket, which leads to the theme of his next episode, the myth of healthcare consumerism. You might be surprised how much I agree with his stance, which is essentially that patients are for the most part not in control like we were told they would be, partially because when we choose to pay insurance instead of paying out of pocket, we stop being true consumers. Now, I've long said that the next phase of consumerism has more to do with the fact that we don't just have new choices, but we have new expectations for our healthcare experience, which results in downstream effects on loyalty, retention, and fragmentation. Unless we get caught up once again in the patients versus consumers debate, I value where Paul's train of thought seems to take him, which is being realistic about the ultimate limitations of the hospital, doctor, insurance-centric model of care being able to meet our needs and expectations at any significant level different than where it has for decades. So I hope I've intrigued you enough to check out the Microdosing Podcast when you have a chance, because there's more thinking against the grain that I think you'll find valuable as you look for your own path for making a difference in healthcare. Let's share more podcasts, blogs, videos, and other content that expands our knowledge of what consumer-centered care is really about. That's another way that we'll build the healthcare of tomorrow, and that's the flavor of the week. The flow. All right, everyone, let's get into the flow. Super excited. We are working on this year's prediction series. This tends to be one of our more popular series of the year, and these episodes usually have a life of their own. And I'm super excited this year for a new pairing in this first in our episode series. Let me first welcome Jeff Gourdji from Profit. Jeff, longtime friend, how are you doing?
I'm good, Jared. Thank you for having me on again.
Again, I love the sound of that. There should be some kind of honor to that or whatnot. But yes, definitely. We're privileged to have you back. And then with you, we've got Paul Schrimpf, longtime colleague of Jeff's, former colleague of Jeff's. But Paul, welcome back.
What's up?
Let me introduce the format for those who aren't familiar. Like I said, we do this every year. The format is we like to have a little bit of fun with this, right? We like to think well-informed opinions, but that's what they are. They're opinions. But they're based on trends and things that we're seeing. What we want to just see is like what are we actually seeing out there that could lead to something else? What do we think we'll see more or less of in the coming year? And these have to do with innovations that may or may not be completely consumer based, but there's something to do with the evolution of care in some way or another. So we'll keep it open-ended that way. And what we'll do is we'll just go back and forth with Jeff and Paul. We have a couple of topics to go on as starters, but I don't know where they're going with these. And that's kind of part of the fun. And then as they have some responses to each other, we'll see where that goes as well. So we'll just lay that as the ground rules and say wherever we go with things that there's no right answers here. Always a good time. Where we like to start, though, our first topic will kind of be traditional care. Let's talk health systems, hospitals, and some possible places where we could see innovations happening in 2025 and beyond. Paul, I'll start with you on this one. Health systems and hospitals. What are you seeing out there? What do you think we'll see more of?
The big question continues to be what is the hospital of the future? Because it seems like more and more things are being pushed outside the hospital. So it's hard to talk about the hospitals and health systems without not talking about the hospitals and health systems, meaning home care. We've seen hospital at home begin to take off. A lot of different versions of things outside the walls. And I think one thing that we're noticing that is making it all possible, or at least required to make it possible, is remote patient monitoring. And I think we've been seeing this trend come along, like more things at home. We're seeing, VeloCare out of Cardinal Health trying to get hospital to home supply chain built out, because even just getting things to a home is dramatically different than getting to a hospital. But more importantly, it actually gets more expensive to deliver home care than hospital care, because you have to take people and put them in motion and out into the field. But the one thing that keeps that in check is remote patient monitoring. And the more remote patient monitoring becomes more integrated into tech platforms, information platforms, and what is called passive monitoring, meaning the patient doesn't have to do anything or a healthcare professional doesn't have to do anything, that's becoming big. And those in the space, we'll call it the abbreviation of RPM, but whether it's AccuHealth and even Carbon Health has gotten to the RPM space and Vivify, we're seeing a bit of a blossoming of that space. And I'm anxious to see how that goes into 2025.
I think we're going to see M&A activity kind of return on the hospital system next year. And I say that for a few reasons. I think it might be a different shape, but I think a few reasons. One, the need to scale and to create the capabilities in population health and care management and new kind of care models is the same as it's always been. It's still there. There's still pressure to do it. I think, though, that there's a couple of environmental things that make it more. I think interest rates are finally going down. I think, and we're recording this. Maybe it's worth saying before the presidential election, but I think regardless of the outcome, there's going to be a more favorable, a less aggressive Justice Department and a more favorable regulatory environment, at least at the federal level. So those are a couple of tailwinds for me. I think the shape of it could start to form. And the last wave was hospital systems merging with one another. I wouldn't be surprised if it's more around buying capabilities and non-hospital organizations so that they find a new way, rather than let's get bigger by buying more of what we are so that we can invest to build. Let's actually just buy what we need to build in terms of care management capabilities, population health capabilities, et cetera.
What's fun now is we're on another chapter of the M&A trend. And I'm not going to mention names, but you can see who the final 7-8 players are likely to be in this race. I mean, the split between fiscally healthy systems and fiscally struggling systems are beginning to separate. It used to be kind of all muddled. And we're seeing this the last couple years, and I didn't know hospitals were this slow, was this idea of systemization and standardization, which is affecting all my B2B clients, which is as hospitals have grown over the years, or health systems, they still kind of operate hospital. Like one hospital will have GE imaging equipment, one will have Philips, one will have this cafeteria service, one will have this. And they're saying, hey, why don't we actually start consolidating platforms so we can move labor around more efficiently? But I think combined with the interest rates and M&A and finally unlocking economic efficiencies in the systems, we're going to see continued consolidation until we get to probably, my guess is probably 5 to 7 players 10 years from now.
Yeah, interesting. What's implicit in what you say, Paul, is that it will no longer be as micro-regional, right? And you see, Advocate Atrium's move across multiple states, and Kaiser's different flavor of a move across different states. And that was something that I think there's been a number of deals blocked over that. I suspect the world will get more comfortable with that, and partially by necessity in terms of driving the scale.
100%.
So college athletic conferences and mega health systems, coast to coast.
Yes, that is a good parallel to draw.
That's right. Hopefully the naming will be a little bit better, and you won't have the Stanfords and the Atlantic Coast Conference issue that I continue to shake my head over.
Well, at least we can be confident that Michigan's not going to make the Final 12.
But yet the glow from last year will last for many more years. Many more years.
He had to throw that in, Jeff.
He did. I like it.
Nothing gets his blood boiling than a little Blue and Maize dialogue.
This year I'm actually okay with a few losses. I'm still floating. I haven't thrown anything at the TV all season.
This will air probably about the time that the final playoff rankings get put out. So we'll have to track that for sure. I like the thought of M&A, Jeff, back to what you're saying of maybe not just purchasing other health systems, but buying on their capabilities, and the build buy discussion maybe changing a little bit as a result. Especially when it comes to tech innovation, which is driving a lot of those capital expenses anyway. So interesting. All right. So let's talk a little bit the payer/payvider side of things. Thoughts on this one, Jeff?
Yeah, related to Paul's idea, I think the payers and led by the payviders, but eventually all the payers are getting more comfortable with the investment in home health, and it's not an extra thing to pay for, but it's actually there's a good return on investment in putting dollars there. And I think that's why the Providence, the Ohio Healths of the world are striking deals with the Compassus and others, because I think that they're realizing they can get reimbursed and they can make money. And Ohio Health, for example, hasn't necessarily been overly progressive in terms of shifting toward value. So even in the traditional kind of fee-for-service model, they're finding they can get paid and they get reimbursed by making those moves into home health. And I think that if the ROI does pay out, it's obviously a win for everybody in terms of, better care at home and lower cost and all the things that we're all striving for. So I think we'll see more evidence of that and more enthusiasm from the payers in 2025.
For sure. I think that's the continued theme is what's happening outside the walls. I think this interesting debate of virtual care, home care, hospital care is kind of beginning to go away. I'll steal an old bad quote from my friend Jamie Edwards. It's like when the stethoscope came out, nobody goes, oh, let's do stethocare. But like right now we've got virtual care, home care, hospital care. We're just going to start going back to calling it care and being somewhat channel agnostic. And I think that was also a breakthrough with all things mental health. I think what's going to be fascinating is more mental health is being delivered virtually. I think there's still plenty of debate going, oh, is virtual care going to take off? I don't think mental health would be in this position it would be today if it wasn't for a surge in virtual care. And I'm anxious to see how new subcategories are created around mental health, whether that is bringing a psychiatrist into the ER when you've got a bipolar patient that shows up at your door and you don't have a psychiatrist in the hospital. Or how do you think about mental health with compliance and chronic conditions? But we're going to see kind of a burgeoning of subcategories of mental health that kind of goes along the lines of just additional channels that we'll see because payers are beginning to see a value from it because that's been so hard to measure. One, because it takes a while, and two, just the infrequency of the data, but just the volume of mental health happening right now is creating a data pool that helps give them some real world evidence to kind of continue to invest in that.
That's really interesting, Paul. I don't have a prediction here, but I actually will be fascinating to see how, as capacity challenges have been enormous and a big driver in what's happening. And I think those are real and maybe will continue. I'm interested to see not just how do we bring more capacity online, but new models and new ways of driving the care. And to your point, that the data set should provide for that, what's working and what's not, and what's the right combination of medicines and therapies and mindfulness and nutrition, which actually I've got a prediction on in a second here, but that all kind of go into that idea. because the mental health crisis is real and personal for me, right? Just people in my family.
It's important because I think we're finally getting past the mental health equals anxiety and depression, but there's a lot more maturity in the way we're thinking about the category, which I think is exciting.
Totally agree. And if that's the onus to keep going and pursue some of these other models and pursue where virtual care fits in different ways, then that seems like it can be a win. Again, I don't know. I can't speak to the sustainability of it, but I agree. The conversation around it has definitely evolved. It has matured. I like that word. I think that's truly what it has been. That's healthy for us. And, and I love the Stethacare thing too. In marketing, it's almost the opposite. There was this famous story of Joe Polizzi and Robert Rose when they were founding Content Marketing Institute. When they were trying to decide what to name it, they originally called the whole practice of content marketing that they originally called it custom publishing, because it's really kind of where it was born out of. And they learned that you just have to add the word marketing to whatever it is, and marketing people get it. And they'll start saying it. So they're like, content marketing, search marketing, social media marketing. And they're like, no, it works. They're like, people get it, what it is. You just add that. So, and maybe we're guilty of that in healthcare. Care, whatever it is, care. Okay, that's what we're talking about, and it makes more sense for whatever reason.
Sounds so caring.
Seriously. Okay, cool. Well, here I'm really excited because we're going to open it up now. When we're thinking about like non-traditional approaches and players here, I see that could probably mean just about anything. So that could mean consumer brands. It could mean retail. It could mean digital health. It could mean adjacent areas, more in wellness, sleep, connected fitness, even longevity. So anything goes here. I'd say predictions in things that could impact just health in other ways. I'll throw it back to you, Paul. Where do you want to go with this one?
Oh, no, I'm kicking it over to Jeff. When he mentioned nutrition, I was like, I want to hear what he has to say because I love talking nutrition, like in all seriousness.
I think that personalized nutrition will become more of maybe it's already a thing. I think it's going to step into the limelight in 2025. And I say that for a few reasons. I think one, greater awareness. I'm not only talking about myself, but including myself, greater awareness of like the importance of like the microbiome and the gut microbiome specifically, and its impact on, immune system and everything that it's being, mental health and it's potentially and all everything it's being connected to. So I think the greater awareness is going to be part of it. Two, I think just how DNA testing is becoming cheaper, and there's these cheaper at-home startups like Viome and Zoe that are getting publicity, and they're still pretty high end. They're not going to go mass yet, but they're starting to come into the conversation. Just all that stuff. It's going to start at the top. It's going to get cheaper. It's going to get more accepted. It's going to get eventually, potentially in 25, I don't know, paid for by payers. And I'll be really curious to see in 26 and 27 and 28 whether there's actually results to justify it. But I think there's enough evidence that there's going to be experiments and moves in that direction in 2025. And just a side note, but back to mental health for a second, there's some case evidence, as I understand it, of a connection. I think, traditional psychiatrists will say nothing's proven yet. But back to the point about new models of mental health care, I would love to see a link and a proven link and more evidence. And I think it might happen that this personalized nutrition has the ability to actually improve mental health. And would it be great if we could, the first line of defense for our kids, for example, or maybe the first line of defense will be therapy, but maybe the next line of defense doesn't have to be medicine. It could be, better diet, better nutrition as a way to solve it. So anyway, it's half a prediction, half a wish, and half something I'm excited. Three halves, but something I'm excited about.
It's interesting because nutrition's been discussed a lot. I mean, I remember the old Netflix series Diagnosis by Dr. Lisa Sanders, I think worked for the New York Times, but they're trying to find diagnoses for these people with bizarre conditions that have been unsuccessful in getting a diagnosis. And one patient was halfway through the documentary series like, oh man, I'm going to be devastated if it's like something wrong with my diet. And she ends up going to like Italy for a diagnosis. And it was something with her diet, which is, I think we all know, but it's always been hard to measure from the payer perspective to get it reimbursed. And I think we're seeing that measurement. I think the split that's going to happen though, and I want to get to a few other topics that kind of maybe flank this, is when you go to nutrition, you have to embrace behavior change. And we as people have been terrible at behavior change, because that's what always frustrates me with a subset of my diabetes clients going, do they know they need to exercise more and eat better? Yeah, that's not the problem. But like, how do we kind of shift that? But I think we're seeing some interesting things for a while with Noom, and they're still kind of sitting on deck more as a weight loss company, but they are more of a behavior change that intersects with weight loss. But how do we think about behavior change around that? And then it's going to be funny because on the opposite side of nutrition, and particularly we think about nutrition and weight loss and health, is this thing called GLP-1, because Americans and most humans love a good quick fix. So it's like, I could eat right, or I could just do GLP-1, or I can watch my cholesterol, or just take a Lipitor. And I think we're going to see kind of that ongoing battle as I think nutrition gets more support, more correct support, but then we're going to love these quick fixes. And it's fun watching like companies like Weight Watchers figure out what their GLP-1 play is. And I can see GLP-1 creating new economies and new submarkets that complement this, but it is going to be this divide between eating right, conscious of nutrition, in the old world of take a pill, take a shot, and get a quick fix.
Well, we know the payers are figuring it out. Like, when are they going to cover? When can they get away with not covering? You have to think that they are also going to be all in on encouraging these other things. And to your point, Paul, discovering that this kind of diet will solve my problem isn't going to work for a lot of people, but it's an unlock for some, right? And it's an improvement toward better, even if not perfection, for some. And weight loss could be redefined in its own whole way next year, to your point, that is inclusive of GLP-1, inclusive of nutrition, inclusive of other community support or ways to drive behavioral change. And it'll be fun to see.
For sure. And then it's funny because there's so much uncertainty in GLP-1. I wouldn't be surprised if 10 years from now we look at and go, oh my God, look what happened to GLP-1 in terms of what it turned into in terms of a wonderful thing. Or what was that all about? That lasted like 2 or 3 years. So it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, let's keep riffing on that.
I touched on all my favorites. My favorites were, GLP-1, little mental health, little remote patient monitoring. I think there's just, I think the other piece to be a little bit of a downer is I don't think we've cracked the code in healthcare labor. And I don't know if we are going to anytime soon. Like, I can see that getting worse, like much worse before it gets better. And I think it's going to take government intervention and some big intervention to make that happen, because I don't think the health systems or a lot of healthcare providers know how to reinvent care delivery models as dramatic as they need to get that. But we're seeing some unfortunate tensions from either constraints on payers creating a margin, which puts constraints on hospital systems earning margin, which puts a constraint on healthcare labor capacity. But that's one where I wish I had a more positive outlook, but I'm still just not seeing enough progress in terms of how care teams are redeployed, how technology is redeployed. If you look at all the other industries, when you look at the people behind the companies providing a product or service to consumers, it's dramatically reduced. Look at the airline industry. That's not a new story, but you used to interact with like 7 to 8 people to get on a plane. Now you don't have to act with any. But the healthcare labor thing is still something where I'm keeping an eye on, crossing my fingers, investing in people that are trying to eliminate it. But my God, we are just stuck in the mud there.
I will make a prediction that we will be talking about this, Paul, the rest of our lives.
I would agree with that. Yes.
As one of my clients put it, and it just kind of stuck with me, is that there are not enough people being born to take care of all the people that have been born already, right? So in other words, the 3 of us are going to be screwed in 15 years. So we need people to take care of us. So I think that one's not going away. You're right. I have to think, and I think, Paul, you probably know more about this than I do, but there's got to be solves in terms of, making it easier to become an MD, making it easier to become more slots in medical schools, more slots in nursing programs. Some of those artificial free market structural barriers may not be enough to solve it, but that's got to be part of it.
I think some of the barriers, I think doctors are touching more things than they need to. If I'm healthy going for a physical, I don't think I need to see a doctor. A physician assistant or an RN's perfectly fine. And I don't need a doctor putting that information in the medical record. Like, take that off their plate. Use doctors for more intense, more specific things. But the amount of volume, it's like putting capacity constraints in the restaurant business around chefs. Like, you have to see the chef before you can eat. I think there's just the criticality of having to see a doctor or talk to the master mechanic when you drop your car off. But I think there's a lot of care, particularly in the routine healthy space, that can be delivered with kind of, doctor oversight from a leadership perspective, but not everybody needs to see a doctor. And we're seeing that with really urgent care trying to take on primary care. And most urgent cares don't have a doctor. And in most cases, it's fine. Not always, but like just the system of like needing to interact with like 4 healthcare professionals with each visit is just not practical.
I got one more, Jared, if it's okay. And this is a shout out to my colleagues back at the shop that were kicking around some ideas with me the other day. I think women's health is going to be thought of differently and is going to be more in the forefront in 2025. And I got two reasons for that. One is I think the political environment, the Dobbs decision, regardless of how the election ends up, I think it's just made it much more front and center in everyone's mind around the importance of women's health. And I think that part of what's going to change is going to be seen more and more pivoting off that, though, because the debate's been very much about reproductive health. I think it's starting to evolve that women's health is so much broader than reproductive health. And I think that it's going to become more of the conversation. You're going to see more health systems making big investments in new women's health centers that will be defined broader than reproduction. I think this will play out for several years, but I think we're going to see in the wake of this election more and more energy and momentum toward that in 2025.
I think I've learned more about menopause in the last 18 months than I've done in my entire life. And I still have a lot more to learn, but like that's one of a gazillion things I think culturally and as an industry in healthcare, we need to get a lot better at because it's just still oddly off to the side.
There's just more and more evidence, again, to the point about women's health being even broader than that. Is there's the general things like pain and mental health that are diagnosed differently. There's more and more awareness about that, and there's kind of more conditions that are just kind of affect women differently, like migraines and other issues like that. Even beyond reproductive related issues, which will continue to be important, obviously.
100%.
Agree. I'll give a shout out there to Ann Summers-Hogg, who hosts the Life-Centered Healthcare podcast, which is one of the ways that's opened my eyes a lot to the evolution of women's health. And that's one of the topics that they cover periodically. And the way we discuss mental health, behavioral health has changed. The way we talk about women's health is in the process of changing. And yeah, I do think that's a healthy direction for everything, for sure.
And I think even zooming out is if you blur our eyes, there's just a lot of things I think historically that have been taboo that intersect with healthcare that are continuing to be less taboo, more talked about. And when they're more talked about, we're actually being smarter in terms of an industry. So I'm excited to see that macro trend continue.
Well, we covered a lot, y'all. That was a lot of trends. That was a lot of predictions. I appreciate that.
We did.
That's just how you two roll. We get through a lot in a short amount of time. So fantastic.
Lots of little rabbit holes you can go into on that one.
I think at least one of the things that we said today is going to actually happen in 2025. That's my last macro prediction.
I like that. So you're just not going to tell us which one? Super fun.
Either 2025 or in the next 3 years, yeah.
One or the other. Which does mean, yes, I do need to have the, hold us accountable episodes, or at least the debrief of review what they were the previous year episodes at some point. So, But only if at least one.
Nobody called the high deductible HMO trend at all. Nobody saw that one coming. That was an exciting one.
No. Well, just say, healthcare is going to be about consumers. Is that your macro prediction, Paul? Is that?
It is. There we go.
I am always would be happy, Jared, to come back to do a why Paul was wrong kind of conversation. So, just let me know what the date is. I'll get it booked.
I was right with the AI. The AI was right.
That's right. We're going to feed it all into the AI, like you said.
You put it in the AI and it answers your questions.
So much fun, guys. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Jared. Cheers.